go off because I can it's
All righty. Hello, everyone. We're just going to give it a second just so everybody can log on. Just going to give it maybe one more minute to let people get on the call. Okie dokie. While people are joining, I will try to get through our intro and then we'll dive into Kim's updates. But hello, everyone. My name is Zoe Newman. I'm the project here at the Utah Housing Coalition. I just want to thank everybody for joining this month's Partners Call. We're super excited to welcome our colleagues and friends from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. So Kim Johnson, the Senior Director of Policies here, and Tia Turner, the newly appointed Project Manager for Our Homes, Our Votes program, is here from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. So we're super excited to engage with them today. We'll start with some federal updates from Kim, and then kind of dive into ways to engage with NLIHC with Tia. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can either put them in the Q&A, put them in the chat. We can also, if you raise your hand or ask to speak in the Q&A, we can also get you to be able to speak during the presentation. So just let us know and notify us and we can get those questions answered. There will be a Q&A, like a formal Q&A session after each presentation. So just hold for that for then, and then we will answer your questions. So without further ado, Kim, are you ready to go?
I am. Thank you so much, Zoe. And thanks everyone for joining today. I'm Kim Johnson. I'm the Senior Director of Policy at the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And I am going to share my slides. Just so folks know before we jump in and get started, I've already shared these with Zoe, so she will be able to share them out with you after the call is done. So no need to frantically jot down notes as I'm talking. But yeah, let's jump on in and get started. That's my name and title, my contact information. Please feel free to reach out as well. Although, like Zoe said, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So I wanted to talk about three key updates from Capitol Hill today, the reconciliation package, the federal budget, and some updates on HUD staffing cuts. So first, reconciliation, and just for a little bit of ground setting, a little bit of table setting before we jump in, reconciliation is basically a special legislative process that allows Congress to consider legislation with around a faster timeline by limiting debate on a measure, limiting the provisions that can be included in a reconciliation package, and by allowing the bill to pass with just 51 votes in the Senate instead of the 60 that are usually required. There are a lot more kind of provisions that make it more complicated and annoying, but that's all you really need to know for the topic of this conversation. And then just to highlight, reconciliation is a separate process from appropriations. Appropriations is the FY26, budget cycle that we'll get to in a second. But these are two different bills and two different legislative processes that we're going to be talking about. So what is in this reconciliation package? You have probably heard about it already. It passed the House, I believe, last Friday. This is the one big beautiful bill that they keep referring to, and it contains a lot of the Trump administration's priorities this year. So first, it has tax cuts and increased spending for the defense and border security, or rather immigration enforcement, really. Those tax cuts are primarily going to benefit higher income households. So our colleagues at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities have been really working overtime to do analysis on this bill, and have reported out that the top 1% of income earners would receive tax cuts that are about 3 times greater than the bottom 60% under the provisions of this bill. These tax cuts would also cost an estimated $3.8 to $5.2 trillion over the next 10 years. By comparison, expanding rental assistance for every eligible household would cost about $1.2 trillion over 10 years. So I say that to also point out that these tax cuts are also going to really limit federal revenues if they're allowed to pass. And so they're going to impact our ability to provide the financing necessary for communities to actually address the housing and homelessness needs of the people living there. There are also changes to the child tax credit, and I believe the earned income tax credit as well, that would exclude as many as 20 million children from receiving the full CTC. Part of that are exclusions based on parents' immigration status, and other factors that would really limit the availability of assistance for families. There are also cuts to essential food assistance and healthcare programs, the deepest cut in the history of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Millions of people, and that includes 2 million children, would be at risk of losing some or all of their food assistance. Those changes to Medicaid would lead to about 15 million people losing their health coverage over 10 years. Some of those changes include additional work requirements, reporting requirements that would more than double the needed paperwork in order to maintain assistance. So, if we're making an argument around government efficiency, I don't know that this would be the thing that I held up. Again, many of these changes would also target citizen children of non-citizen parents. To be clear, non-citizens are already ineligible for receiving these benefits, and that also, of course, includes housing benefits. And so these changes would really primarily impact the citizen children of immigrant families. And again, and this is especially relevant, of course, to this group, a lot of these proposals would shift the cost sharing burden to states. And so it would make it a lot more expensive for states to run these programs. And as we'll talk about in the budget coming up, shifting not only Medicare cost savings and SNAP cost savings to states, but housing assistance as well, is really just putting more and more burden on states to cover the gaps left by the federal budget. And so, if these were allowed to go forward, what programs and policies would states be unable to implement or to continue because they're trying to make up for this difference of lost funding from the federal government? I included there a link to a really great resource from our colleagues at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and it outlines the impact of these proposals specifically for, I can't, I'll just message this to Zoe. Specifically for Utah. They also have additional fact sheets on other states too, but wanted to share this one for obvious reasons. An additional provision that got thrown into the House reconciliation package a little bit at the last minute are some low-income housing tax credit provisions. That includes a 12.5% allocation increase for 3 years, lowering the bond financing threshold from 50% to 25%, and designating rural and tribal areas as difficult to develop areas, which will make them eligible for an immediate basis boost. So these provisions are expected to result in the construction of about 500,000 additional affordable homes in the next 10 years, which is of course nothing to sneeze at. Those are all good. NLIHC generally supports the low-income housing tax credit, and we support in particular the designation of the DDA designation for rural and tribal areas. But compared to kind of the level of need, we have 12 million households who are already spending over half of their income on rent, and about 75% of them are extremely low income and will not be ostensibly impacted by the units that are going to be built. And so, in addition to while these lag tech provisions are good, it is a little bit like putting lipstick on a pig, and trying to pass it off as something good and big and beautiful. And so I think it's important to point out that even with these provisions too, we're still going to see from this package massive impact on low-income communities and the people who are served by all of these programs. And I say all this about the reconciliation package too, but to point out, NLIHC's work has not been particularly focused on this reconciliation package. So I would love to answer any questions folks might have, but if I don't know the answer, I will be passing you off to my esteemed colleagues at the Center on Budget who have been putting in overtime to understand the impact of this bill on low-income households. So what happens next? Like I said at the top, the House passed their version of the reconciliation bill before Memorial Day recess, so 2 weeks ago. And now the bill is being considered by the Senate. There is a lot of pressures on senators to adopt the bill as is, although that is unlikely. Some Republicans want more defense spending or are unhappy with increasing the federal deficit. So that would be Senator Ron Johnson up in Wisconsin. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did, and I liked it. So that's Ron Johnson wants to see, is very upset with the federal deficit, as is unsurprisingly Rand Paul in Kentucky. Other Republicans are really hesitant to enact unpopular cuts and changes to Medicaid and SNAP, and that includes Senator Murkowski in Alaska, Collins in Maine, Hawley in Missouri, Tillis in North Carolina, and Cassidy in Louisiana. There's also ongoing debate over whether to include a lift of the federal debt ceiling. I don't know if folks recall, but 2 years ago we got in another debate around the lifting of the federal debt ceiling that almost caused not even a government shutdown, but something even worse, a third mysterious thing that's never happened, where we default on our federal debt. That obviously did not happen, but we are once again running up against that deadline this year. One other thing, because of course this is reconciliation, they only need 50 Republicans to join on, so they can only afford 4 defections from the Republican Party in order to get this bill over the finish line in the Senate. The goal is to have a final bill passed by July 4th. That seems relatively unlikely, but I also thought it was unlikely that they would pass it through the House before Memorial Day recess. So I am learning not to underestimate the power of arm twisting from the Trump administration and the impact that that can have on members of Congress. So, continuing the the feel-good news, as I'm sure folks again saw, President Trump's fuller FY26 budget request came out 5:30 last Friday evening. It would propose really drastic cuts to non-defense spending generally, I think around 26%. But it also includes a cut to HUD's budget by around 44% from the previous year. And that includes a 43% cut to HUD's rental assistance programs, and including a redesign of rental assistance entirely, which we will dive into the details of in a minute. There are also cuts to homelessness assistance grants of about 13% from FY25. It would also consolidate the continuum of care and for some reason the housing opportunities for people with AIDS or HOPWA programs under the Emergency Solutions Grants or ESG program. And we'll talk a little bit about what the implications of that would be. In a second, it would impose a 2-year time limit on receiving rental or homelessness assistance. You probably have very reasonable and intelligent questions about what that would look like, how that would be implemented. Would that be a lifetime of 2 years or 2 consecutive years? Would it count backwards? None of those questions were answered in this budget proposal, unfortunately. Um, and it would also, this proposal would cut about $479 million from Native housing programs and consolidate the Indian Housing Block Grant Program into or multiple programs under IHBG. Would also cut funding for lead hazards and healthy homes funding, and totally eliminate a number of programs, including community development block grants, the Home Investment Partnership Program, family self-sufficiency programs, which I don't think I need to point out to this group the irony of an administration who says they want to increase self-sufficiency and then cuts totally funding for the programs that help families do that. They would also remove the pathways to removing obstacles or pro-housing grants program, which helps localities identify needed zoning changes, which again, ironic given the administration's focused on zoning. It would eliminate the Fair Housing Initiatives program, and it would also eliminate the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. The budget request, so I mentioned earlier that it would cut funding and really restructure rental assistance programs. So it would consolidate 5 different programs: the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Section 202, Housing for People with Disabilities, Section 811, or Section 202, Housing for the Elderly, Section 811, Housing for People with Disabilities, project-based rental assistance, and public housing, all into one gigantic block grant that they would call the State Rental Assistance Block Grant. They would impose a 2-year time limit that would likely exclude older adults and some people with disabilities. In the fuller budget request, we got a few additional details. The HUD secretary would have the right to basically decide what the formula grant would entail for distributing that state rental assistance block grant. And we also learned that they would prioritize funding for older adults and people with disabilities. However, there is absolutely no way to cut that much funding from rental assistance without people losing the assistance they rely on. So even as they're trying to kind of cushion it and say, oh, we're going to make sure the people who need it the most are still taken care of, there's no way to do all of this without people losing their assistance and falling into homelessness. It's also important to point out too, things like time limits really ignore the reality of low wages and high rents. People don't stay on rental assistance because it's fun or because it's easy. People are simply not paid enough to afford the cost of rent. And 2 years, 2-year time limit is not going to make people gain self-sufficiency, especially when we're also cutting the self-sufficiency programs. So. And another important point to make too around block grants is that block granting programs tend to lead to future funding cuts. This is from obviously our friends at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and tracking just various the speed with which various programs that have been block granted have fallen. States would also be responsible for sharing the cost. And so, of course, that would impact state budgets, especially if this reconciliation package goes through. And you all are now also expected to carry the weight of the SNAP and Medicaid cuts too. And states would be responsible for implementing those harsh cuts. So Congress and the administration would say, okay, we're slashing all this funding, redesigning these programs, and now it's up to you all to decide who gets funding and who doesn't. So very kind of a cowardly abdication too of really sitting with the consequences of these decisions. And this is a new resource too, or a new image from our colleagues at the Center on Budget, looking at how housing block grants have declined sharply over time. And so that's the Home Investment Partnership Program, the Community Development Block Grant, and the the Indian Housing Block Grant Program have all declined precipitously since being created as block grant programs. Part of the reason for this is that it's really, really easy to essentially say, hey, like, because this funding is no longer going to specific accounts. It's a lot more difficult to track where funding is being spent and how it's being used. And so it's a lot easier to say, hey, this is a slush fund. We can't even tell where this money is going. And then to feel justified in cutting it because, well, we can't tell where that money is going anyway, which is something that we've seen a lot with the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families or TANF program. And in addition to kind of the big cuts that were outlined in the president's budget request for FY26, there's also a need for additional funding for nearly 60,000 emergency housing vouchers. The Emergency Housing Voucher Program was created in the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, and it provided funding, $5 billion of funding for the creation of about 70,000 new emergency housing vouchers targeted specifically to people experiencing or at risk of homelessness, and survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, intimate partner violence. That funding was supposed to last for about 10 years, but because of the rapid increase in rent over the last few years, it has depleted a lot more quickly than anticipated. And as a result, we're now facing a funding cliff for the EHV program, putting more than 59,000 households who currently have an EHV at risk of losing that assistance. Communities, of course, because PHAs and the Housing Choice Voucher Program have been so drastically underfunded, communities don't have the resources to transition them into, say, the Housing Choice Voucher Program or a state and local program. Again, especially if all of these budget cuts and the reconciliation package comes to fruition, that's even less money for states to help with these other issues. We developed a toolkit that I will also share with our colleagues at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and the National Housing Law Project on emergency housing vouchers, and it includes a lot of resources. It's a living document that we are continuing to update as more resources and information become available, but would really encourage folks to take a look at that. EHVs provide a really vital lifeline to a lot of low-income people who were struggling before the pandemic with housing insecurity and homelessness. And these are just a few examples of households who have been helped by this program so far. So what comes next for this budget request? House and Senate appropriators are going to be drafting their FY26 spending bills over the next few weeks. It's likely that reconciliation is going to really kind of take the front seat to budget talks. And so it's likely we'll see kind of a delayed next step. Although the House THUD subcommittee markup is scheduled for July 14th and a full committee markup scheduled for July 17th. So we will likely see a budget out of the House before then. And just highlighting to a member of the House Appropriations Committee from Utah, Celeste Malloy, who could be a good person to reach out to if she's your representative. The Senate Appropriations Committees and subcommittees have not yet scheduled their markup, so it remains to be seen. But regardless, Congress has until October 1st of this year to enact a final budget, or we will be in a government shutdown, or more likely another continuing resolution. HUD Secretary Scott Turner is also going to be testifying on the president's budget request on June 10th in the House, and possibly the Senate. Usually they kind of schedule them back to back to I guess just knock them out all in one go. It's a very, very boring day for me, but that's okay. So we will be tuning in for that whenever that takes place and sending out our analysis of those testimonies as well. So finally, before I hand it back on over to Zoe for Q&A, I wanted to highlight some updates on HUD staffing cuts. As I'm sure folks remember, back in, gosh, I think March, there was a RIF notice, a reduction in force notice that was issued to HUD. We were seeing plans for workforce reductions of up to 50%. Since then, they have offered HUD employees two different opportunities for a buyout or a fork in the road offer. And people took it. So since January, we've seen a reduction in HUD staffing by about 25 to 30%. It's primarily field office staff, But unsurprisingly, and if only someone had told them this would happen, HUD processing times have already been impacted by the lack of capacity. So we're seeing that for COC funding, for service coordinator contracts. So if you are waiting on funding, um, what we've been hearing is there's nothing kind of fishy going on around holding it back, but rather HUD is simply lacking capacity now, even more so than before. We believe that the dust may be starting to settle on layoffs with, a hearty knock on wood to hope for the best. Because we're already seeing that kind of drag of processing times at HUD, the secretary has been like, oh, maybe we should we should stop doing this. And because so many people took the leveraged buyout, HUD has actually run out of money to pay off everyone who wants this buyout. So efficiency, very well planned. So they can't offer that buyout to anyone else because they're out of money to do so. So that is where HUD staffing cuts are. We're kind of keeping our eyes open for like who's left, what are things going to look like, what is capacity going to look like with once this dust starts to settle. But yeah, so that's where things are now. And then just including some resources that we have. We have a Take Action Toolkit, links to contact your members of Congress and to help tell stories from directly impacted folks. Also, that toolkit I highlighted on emergency housing vouchers and our ongoing national letter for organizations to sign to oppose cuts to critical housing investments and support expanding resources. I am 1 single minute over time, and I'll turn it back on over to Zoe.
Alrighty. Thank you so much, Kim. That was super helpful. As always. We have a question in the chat, and then, like I said, throw your questions in the chat, raise your hand if you want to ask it out loud, put it in the Q&A, whatever you want to do. But Sarah Strang has a question. So has there been any information related to TANF overall that has come out? We've heard a lot about HUD and SNAP's benefits, but not TANF overall.
Yeah, so that is a great question. I have not heard anything about TANF. Sorry, I'm just clicking through to see if I have any additional resources on um that question. Since we haven't closely been following the reconciliation package, I am actually not 100% sure, but I did see this resource from the First Focus for Children, I guess. Anyway, but it kind of walks through some of the potential changes to the social services block grant and to TANF that could oh, actually, they're not in the reconciliation package. Okay, well, that's good. This is a letter telling them to not put them in. So my understanding is that TANF then is not included in the reconciliation package. So that is good.
Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat or in the question. Okay. Do we know if self-help funding has been eliminated?
In the president's budget proposal, yes. And I think it's important to be clear too that the budget request is just that. It's a request and not a reality. So while the president is proposing a lot of really bananas cuts to a lot of very important programs, part of why he's doing that is because his administration just straight up does not understand how these programs work, what they do. And so, if self-help funding or any of these other programs are really crucial to the continued operation and function of your organization and your mission, reach out to your members of Congress and tell them like, hey, this is the impact of these cuts. This is what would happen if the self-help program were eliminated. I highlighted just one member on the House Appropriations Committee from Utah, but it's going to take everyone to like either oppose a bad bill or get a good bill over the finish line. So there's really no wrong person to be bothering about this.
Michael, did you have anything follow up that you wanted to ask?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Has to do with on the advocating for HUD spending, and that is with regard to block granting to states. Do you have any insight on what the state legislative associations are thinking, um, or even with the Governors Association?
Yeah, great question. My understanding from what I've heard from our partners, we have partners at the NACO, National Alliance of Counties, and at US Mayors and CEOs for US Housing Investments. They have not been particularly vocal about either of these proposals, but my understanding is because they understand oh, if all of this federal funding is cut, our states and our communities are going to have to pick up the bill on this. They have historically been opposed to block granting those programs. I'll add too that there is not appetite on Capitol Hill for figuring out how to block grant rental assistance and homelessness assistance programs for figuring out all the nuances of that, which is good, but we also want to make sure that the kind of seed of the idea of it doesn't start to take root and grow into something that becomes an active and actual threat to funding.
And then, Kim, do you have time? We have 3 more questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so one in the chat says, have you had an opportunity to review how RD funding for housing will be impacted? Specifically, they're asking from a rural development perspective.
Yeah, great question. So again, I'm going to pull up a resource from our friends at the Housing Assistance Council, which does rural housing specifically. And this provides, I think, an overview of some of the FY26 budget details. There's an additional $100 million for rural finance assistance program through the Treasury. There are also reductions to USDA programs. Section 502 direct mortgage would end, along with the Section 523 self-help program, Section 542 tenant vouchers, broadband, community facilities grants as well. So yes, a lot of things would be cut. A lot of rural housing technical assistance would also be limited. So not a great budget for rural development either.
And then it's kind of a question comment. It seems that most of these actions will impact seniors. Is there a course of action that can be taken by older adults?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have colleagues at Leading Age who are really leading the charge on housing for older adults. And I will say, members of Congress in particular, really like to pay lip service to the importance of ensuring that older adults have safe, stable housing. But we also know, right, that I think the fastest growing group of people experiencing falling into homelessness. And so really uplifting the stories of seniors who would be impacted by these cuts, of seniors who would lose their assistance, of seniors who would be put at risk of homelessness would be a great way of driving home the impact of these cuts in a way that really underscores an important talking point for in particular Republicans.
Then last question here. Can you repeat, if already stated, what is the timeline for Congress to make a decision?
Yeah, so the decision on reconciliation is going to their kind of ideal timeline is the July 4th holiday. They want to have a final bill passed through both the House and Senate and on the president's desk to sign into law by July 4th. For the federal appropriations process, the deadline is October 1st, which is when the new fiscal year begins. But we'll likely see a draft budget out of the House probably in early July, if I had to guess, if they're trying to do markups by mid-July. So early July, we'll see more information on the budget, but their deadline isn't until October 1st for a final one.
And then, alrighty, I think that looks like all of our questions. Oh, and then just a comment from our friend James. Thank you. This is fuel for content in my television program. God bless. So
Great.
awesome. Alrighty. So thank you, Kim, so much for your time. I know you have to pop off here in a second, but we really do appreciate that update and very, very helpful. Oh, wait, we have one last question, but I can always send it to you if you don't have time. Are you okay to?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can, yeah.
Okay, so will things like eliminating 502 loans and 523 grants be explicit in reconciliation, or will it be done by the agency?
Yeah, so the 502 and 523 grants, I think that I just listed off from the rural page, those cuts are in the appropriations package and not in reconciliation. Reconciliation doesn't touch those programs, so that's good. But for kind of the question of like, oh, would this like elimination be done by the agency? Only Congress can really decide whether or not that funding will go through. So if basically this budget request is like a list of the Trump administration's priorities, they're painting you a picture of the world they want to live in, and the world is really bleak. But whether or not those programs ultimately get funding or are eliminated are up to Congress. So yeah, that's why congressional advocacy is always so important. Ultimately, the power for spending federal money lies with Congress and not the president. So those are the folks, those are the people who really matter in this conversation.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Kim.
Of course, thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day. Feel free to reach out with any questions. My pleasure to join you.
Thank you. All right, without further ado, we are going to have Tia pop on here. I'm going to share some slides here. Okay. Can everybody see that okay? Tia, can you see the slides?
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, Zoe. I'll go ahead and take over. Thank you to my colleague, Tim. My role is to really just get you all motivated and mobilized and take action on all of these things that are impacting our communities. And so I'm just going to go over who NLIHC is, the National Low Income Housing Coalition. We are dedicated to achieving racially and socially equitable public policy that ensures people with the lowest of incomes have quality homes that are affordable and accessible in communities of their choices. So we focus on the 30% AMI and below um, um, individuals that are being impacted by federal policy every day. And so how we kind of ground our solution and how we mobilize is our core policy solutions are bridging the gap between incomes and housing costs, expanding and preserving the supply of deeply unaffordable rental homes, providing emergency rental assistance to stabilize families in crisis, and to strengthen and enforce renters protection. And then we also focus on the criminalization of homelessness as well and work with partners, our national partners at NAAH, to do that work as well. And so you can go to the next slide, Zoe. And so what I'm here today is to empower you to get active and to move. So as it was mentioned earlier, I was one of the housing advocacy organizers for the coalition, and my job is to connect you to our membership, help you get the tools that you need to mobilize and take action on a federal level, and also giving advice on how you can effectively advocate on a state and local level as well. And I covered a good bit of the southeast, southwest states, so that was everything between Utah, Oklahoma, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Colorado. So many great states that are similarly adjacent as it relates to the barriers that you all face. And so I'm from Huntsville, Alabama, moved to DC about 2 years ago, and just excited to be doing this work. I am the new project manager for our Homes Our Votes program, and that is a work that we focus on that housing should be an election issue and getting our residents and tenants connected to that work and mobilize on those efforts. And so excited to be with you here today and to talk about advocacy and the tools that we have available here at the coalition for you all to effectively do your work on a state level. And so what we pretty much have, and you can move on to the next slide. We have a number of tools that you all can use. One of the tools that I really would like to highlight, give me just a second, for you all, especially around the advocacy around opposing the federal investments, a lot of the budget cuts that are happening right now. We do have a toolkit that is available for your use that I'll share in the chat. And the toolkit is really helpful. And this is something that it has talking points within the toolkit for you to reach your congressional members and talk about, what's happening and how these cuts are going to impact your communities. And so that's one of the tools that we have right now around the federal budget that you all can use at your disposal. So the good news is that we are growing strong in coalition, and we are seeing so many people around the country organized and ready to do this work. And as a state, as Utah, our whole goal is to make sure that you all are equipped to have all the things that you need to be able to mobilize in a stronger effort as well. And we have many congressional champions during this time as well. And we also seen a lot of great things with housing being a major election issue during the presidential election 2024. And so we've seen progress. And although we're in very trying times right now, there's so many things that we can do to get our voices heard throughout this time. And so I'm excited to be able to share those things. And you can go to the next slide, Zoe. And so advocacy, just breaking down what advocacy is. A lot of people tend to kind of get advocacy and lobbying mixed up. And I just want to break down the barriers of advocacy and lobbying. So advocacy is solely sharing information and organizing in support of a cause. We're not asking, them to make a decision on a certain policy or a certain, or not trying to sway them to make a decision, but solely educating them of how certain policies are impacting our communities and suggesting things that solutions that they can help to kind of combat some things that are impacting the people the most vulnerable in our communities. And so lobbying must include like 3 activities. So typically lobbying is communicating with a decision maker, communicating about existing or potential legislation, and asking the decision maker to vote a specific way on the legislation. So advocacy is sharing information and organizing in support of a cause. And so just to kind of break down some barriers there. So the 501c3 organizations can lobby if it fits within their mission. However, in general, it should limit to less than 5% of overall staff time and resources. And you also can find out more about legal considerations for lobbying at bolderadvocacy.org. So that's www.bolder, B-O-L-D-E-R, advocacy.org, to get a little bit more information on the breakdown of advocacy and lobbying and how if you have an organization, how that may impact your work. And so some tools, and you can go to the next slide for me, Zoe. And so just advocacy, you want to make sure that you're having these conversations and sharing stories about how, people are being impacted, whether that's on the state level, whether that's on the federal level, by the policies that are coming out, or policies that can be advocated for, that would have great impact within your communities. You are the expert in the issue on the issues that are happening within your communities. A lot of times, what I have noticed, that many people think that you have to have a ton of funding, a ton of resources to be able to effectively make, impact or be at the table. But we often here at the coalition, although that we do our work on a federal level, we always say that you're the experts of what's happening in your community, how you're being impacted by it, how the people that you are providing services for are being impacted by it. And so just remember that you are the expert, you know what's happening, and use that as leverage to be able, as you're talking to your state legislators, or if you're talking to your congressional members, using that as a way to really, get out your story and get out the stories of so many of the people that you are providing stories for. Providing services for, rather. You want to be able to, during your advocacy work, you want to bring directly impacted people in the conversation. Oftentimes, I know a lot of organizations kind of struggle with that because they don't want to seem like they're tokenizing people. But there's an eloquent way and graceful way to bring people at the table and making sure those that are directly impacted voices are at the table. You need them at the table, and it's almost a disservice if you don't have them at the table of your decision making and the things that you're advocating around. And so I always say, look at those that are directly impacted as experts in their stories and their experience as well. And so you want to be able to also build strong partnerships as well. So building relationships and establishing a tone of partnership with those people that are directly impacted and with your congressional members and state legislators is important. Oftentimes we see people, they'll have advocacy days and they go to their state legislator, and then that's it. There's no follow-up. There's no, checking in. When you leave your leave behind, build a relationship with them. Check in, reach out to their staff, ask them, hey, we met on this day, we left this behind. Are there any thoughts or what is happening here? You want to make sure that you're building those strong relationships with your state legislator, with your congressional members, or even your local administrations. You want to make sure that you're being consistent and consistently showing up at the table and being persistent. That is where you get so many just a positive feedback when you're just constantly showing up. And so then you also want to make sure that you're researching your legislators ahead of time whenever you're meeting or whenever you're talking with them. A lot of times they may not focus on specific housing, affordable housing solutions or homelessness, but you can find intersects, that things that kind of are adjacent to the work that they've done, and really, remind them, hey, I saw you introduce this bill, and I thought that was really great. Something like that. You want to make sure that you connect with them in the work that they're doing as well before you're making your ask. And so these are just some general overviews of like things that you can do as you're having your advocacy meetings, and you're meeting with your state legislators, and you're meeting with your congressional membership. And I'll share out, Zoe has this slide, and so she'll share it out, and we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so what do we have available here at NLIHC? One of our biggest, I would say, one of our biggest tools that we have here is our gap report and out of reach report. We get people all over the country, and I'll drop that in the chat. We get people all over the country where they're going to their congressional membership, or they're going to their state legislator, and like they're showing them the data and how people are being impacted, and what the numbers are. So our gap report it shows and exemplifies the shortage of affordable rental homes in each state, and it breaks it down by metropolitan as well. And so it's a great resource to be able to utilize whenever you are meeting with your congressional members, and you're also meeting with your state legislators. A lot of times, congressional members are very fascinated with this level of research, and especially when it's broken down by state. And it's a tool that you can use to be able to be effective in the work that you're doing. We also, our out of reach report, the first link that I dropped, it is a tool to be able to look at the what you make, what a person has to make in order to afford a rental home. And so in Utah, the fair market in that you'll see on the image down below, you will see that in Utah, the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is $1,398 in order to afford this level of rent and utilities without paying more than 30% of income. On housing, a household must make and earn $4,600 monthly, or $55,000 annually, assuming a 40-hour work week, 52 weeks per year. This level of income translates into an hourly housing wage of $26.89 per hour that you have to make in order to afford at least a 2-bedroom rental home. And so these are tools that we have available for you to be able to use whenever you're meeting with your congressional members, whenever you're meeting with your state legislators. And yeah, so I'm really excited that we're on the call with you all today. Another way to take action, we have a take action link that I'm going to drop in the chat as well. And that take action, it links to everything that NLIHC is taking action on, or opposing, or supporting at this very moment. And you should have the link, and you can go on there, and it's simple as whatever that you're most passionate about or you want to take action on. You'll click the take action button, whether it's opposing the HUD cut, and it'll take you directly to a page to whether you're going to sign on to a letter, or whether it's going to connect you directly to your congressional member to be able to call them and let them know why they should, what's happening, how you can, and how they can support or oppose certain things that are happening. So our Take Action Hub and our Advocacy Hub, it's a great resource and tool to be able to go to, learn about our policies, learn about the things that we're moving on. We also have a learning lab where you can learn about advocacy in a more in-depth way as well. And so these are some tools and resources that we have at your disposal to be able to make effective change. And you can go to the next slide, Zoe. And so I also want to share a quick, I guess, a plug here with one of our partners at the Housing Narrative Lab, that they have resources on how you can really shape stories and be able to build a story and use those stories to be impactful when you are meeting with your congressional or state legislators. So this is also a very great tool for you to be able to use as you're kind of shaping the narrative and trying to make change. And you can go to the next slide, Zoe. And so right now, if you take a picture of this QR code, it'll take you directly to some of our take action information and ways that you can connect to your congressional members. And then we can go to the next slide. And then how do you connect with NLIHC? You can become a member, obviously. Becoming a member is no set cost. You can pay as little as $5 annually to be able to become a member of NLIHC and get connected into the work that we're doing. We have 46 states represented of people that are membership within 46 different states all over the country. We have state and tribal partners like Utah Housing Coalition that are one of our main partners that we go to whenever there's questions that we have, that things that happen on a state level, and then also they're a resource to us, getting the information out to you all as well. And so it's definitely benefits to becoming members. We have bi-weekly webinars for federal policy updates. And then you can also download our research reports and fact sheets at nlihc.org and follow us on social media. And email me, although I'm not going to be the housing advocacy organizer for Utah anymore, I can still be as a resource until we get our new person in and connected. And so it has been great to connect with you all today and look forward to answering any questions that you have in the chat. Thank you, Zoe.
Yeah, that was so helpful. Thank you so much. So we do have some questions and comments. So I just want to bring this one up. So when we were going over just the salary and how much to afford a 2-bedroom, we just had a comment on it where it's like that salary amount is not what people are earning in the state unless you are in a better financial situation. And you can follow up with this, but I will just say like some of the wage charts and kind of what people are actually earning in areas. So the NLIHC does have data about what is the average wage in these areas, and then what is like the livable wage of what people need to be earning to be able to afford the fair market rent, which kind of like this comment shows is not what we're experiencing right now. People aren't making enough to make ends meet. But Tia, would you like to follow up with something?
Yeah, I think you answered it perfectly. So yeah, I think you answered it perfectly. I have one more resource that I'm gonna drop. I'm looking for it now. Give me 1 second. So you want to go to the next question and then I'll follow back up.
Yeah. And then we had a question that says, earlier you shared doing research on state and federal legislators. Do you track and make available what our federal Utah legislators are supporting and sponsoring?
Not directly. No, we don't do it directly. Whenever there's something that we need to figure out as far as like what congressional members are supporting and what bills that we are advocating for or opposing, we often try to go and cross-reference what what the players are, who the players are, versus as far as the committees that they're in and different things like that. So we kind of do it that way, but not directly as keeping up what's happening with Utah, because we have membership all over the country. We just kind of do it in a sense of who's on what committee, different things like that.
And then we had just another comment that says, these are great resources. Thanks for sharing. Any other questions? I really do. I mean, Tia is a great resource, so please ask your questions. Let's try to get 2 more questions. Let's see.
And then I will give me 1 second. I'm having some
Okay.
issues with my internet right now. It's running a little slow.
No, you're okay. And if you want to, that other resource, okay, you got it. I was gonna say all of these we will send out afterwards too. Okay, we had another question. Oh, two more questions. Okay, perfect. Do you have more updated information on the housing trust funds? They seem to be over 5 years old.
So that is not my lane, but I think that I, I can follow up with Zoe on that question.
Okay. Awesome. And then let's see, let's scroll down here. Any word on legislation regarding regulating vacation rentals? That's a huge thing here in Utah.
I don't. So I'm not policy, but I haven't heard anything directly around regulating vacation rentals yet, and so I don't know if that would. We haven't heard anything federally. I'll say that.
And then I think, I mean, I don't see any more questions, so I think, oh, we have a thank you. Um, no, thank you so much, Tia. That was fabulous. I mean, I know at the Utah Housing Coalition, I mean, we tap into you guys pretty often, and I just want to uplift, Tia, Kim, and their whole entire team. Whenever we have questions about data or what's going on or advocacy or lobbying opportunities, they're so quick to get back to us and they're just a wonderful resource. So I love that we went through kind of what a federal update looks like on one of your guys' calls. And then also kind of diving into, Tia, what you were talking about all these resources and kind of the expansive work that you guys are doing, not just in DC, but also with all of your partners. And I know us in Utah will try to email you and work with you as much as possible while we still have you. So thank you so much. You did fabulous. And thank you everybody on the call for coming. We really, really enjoyed this. So we'll continue to host these and just reach out if you have any questions or want to get connected.
Thank you so much, Tara and Zoe, for having us. And as Zoe said, reach out. Feel free to reach out to us at any point if you have any questions. And thank you all for being such amazing partners, Zoe and Tara.
Thank you, everyone.